Bonjour, my name is Kaija, and in this video I will be showing you how to bead a pink shirt pin for Pink Shirt Day. First, we are going to make sure we have all of our materials together. Now we are going to be taking a medium length of thread for the beginning part of our pin. It is up to you whether you'd like to do a single or a double thread, but in this video I will be showing you how to bead with a single thread. I also find that it's easier to bead with a single thread than a double thread. I like to knot the end of my thread first, and I try to do a double or a triple knot so that it will become secure when I bead. After knotting your thread, we will now move on to threading our needle. This part takes a little bit of time, as sometimes the thread doesn't go through the needle like the way we'd like it to, but just take your time. It takes patience. Don't get frustrated. If you can't do it, take a little break, come back, and then try redoing it. Once you have your thread and your needle, we will move on to the next part. As you can see, I was struggling with putting the thread onto my needle. So now that we threaded our needle, we are going to move on to threading the paper onto the pellin, or also known as interfacing. I found that the paper overlapped the pellin, and so I cut it. And now we will thread the paper down, so that way when you start beading, the paper will not shift out of place. Once you have threaded down all four sides, we will make a knot or two, and then cut the thread. This part will only be used for securing the paper down. I personally like to cut the tails off of the knotted threads as it gets in my way and sometimes tangles up with the current thread I'm working with. I realize I still have quite a bit of thread left on my needle, and so I will continue to use it until it gets short. And don't forget to knot your thread. And finally, we can now start to bead. I will be starting from the bottom left corner and working my way on top of the outline first. We will start by poking the needle from the back to the front, making sure you pull that thread all the way through. Now you'll be ready to thread your beads on. I'll be using white as my outline, but you can use whichever color you'd like. We will start by adding beads onto our needle. I like to start off with a few beads to gauge how many more beads that I will need to add. So now I'll bring those beads down the string to the paper and line up with the outline to see how many more beads I need to add. Also, here's a tip I learned while practicing beading. It's better to have not enough beads than it is to have too much beads. When you add too many beads to your line, it will bunch up and not look smooth. Whereas if you put the right amount of beads, or not enough, you can always add one bead or more if needed. Regardless if this is your first time or you're still a beginner and you've added too many beads, then that is okay. Please do not beat yourself up over it. It's not worth it, trust me. It takes practice, it takes time, and it takes patience. Every time we make something, it will always be a learning process. Once you have strung your beads, it is now time to sew them down. We are going to go through the other corner with our needle and pull tight. Always make sure you're pulling your thread tight when sewing the beads down, and make sure the beads are lined up with the outline. This is where we will be poking our needle through onto the outline from the back to the front. As you can see that I'm on the outline, or just on the outline. We'll be pulling that string through. There we go. Oh, our string became loose. We're going to tighten it again. We're going to come over the two beads there. So I'm going to be stitching every two beads into the paper or the pellin. It's not focusing. Here we go. And we'll be going back down. So we'll be sewing every 2 beads into the pellin or into our design here. You pull that string again through, pull it tight, and there we go. We have our first stitch, our first sewn down 2 beads. And we're going to be continuing this process every 2 beads. I would also like to mention that if you've lost track of where you are, you can always kind of keep track of how many beads you've sewn down so far. So for me it was 2, 4, 6, and so that'd be my 3rd stitch. So I'd go in between the 6th and 7th bead, and then pull my string tight, go in between the 2 beads, and stitch it back down. And pull tight again, and then redo the process. So if you're like me, I like to think a lot when I bead, and sometimes I lose track of what I'm doing. Even I forget about how many beads I've sewn down. So if you have good lighting, you can sometimes see where you threaded your beads and then continue on from there. Or you can literally just pick a bead and thread that down and then continue the 2 bead process. Now that we have finished our first section, we will be moving on to the next section. This is where I will be poking my needle between the 2 beads here, as you can see. And then I'll be going through that 1 bead right at the end with my needle. So as you can see, my needle is through the 1 bead. I'll be pulling my needle and the thread through it, and always make sure that it's tight, and then you can continue on to your second section. I do this for a more connected feel. You don't have to do the way I do it. You can just reset it if you'd like. And now we're going to continue the steps that we did for the first section. Alright, we finally completed the outline. Woo! That was a long journey, wasn't it? Beading does take time. and patience, like I said. But we got through it, and now we're going to get through the other section. Remember what I said, double or triple your knots, and then cut the tails off afterwards. So now we can do the filling in of the beads. I will be using all pink for the fill. It's up to you whether you want your t-shirt to look different, have some sort of design, but I'm going to be doing just pink for the inside. Again, I like to start at the bottom. You can start wherever you'd like, wherever is suitable for you, whatever is easier. But for me, I like starting at the bottom and working my way up. For this part, you can actually count how many beads go onto your string. I didn't do that, I just guessed for each part that I did, or for each line or section that I did of the shirt. But you can count, as it should be the same amount of beads going up to the t-shirt until the armpits. So once you've calculated or counted how many beads have to go on your string or your thread, you can now pin that sucker down. you can pin it down. Make sure you pull that thread all the way through, making sure it's tight when you pull it. And we're just going to be redoing what we did from the beginning, going every 2 beads, tacking it down, and so on and so forth. And that's what we will be doing again throughout this whole process of filling in the shirt. Now we're on the home stretch. We can now begin to rip away the paper and cut your t-shirt out. But first we will begin with the paper by ripping it off of the sewn part. So whatever is not beaded down, you can easily rip it, as you can see here. Sometimes it does get hard to rip the paper when you get into the close corners, as you will see here in a moment. Also, I should have just cut my outside string because I don't need it anymore. It would have been easier to rip the paper off, but hey, we learn as we go. So as you can see, in that little corner there, it's a little bit hard to get that paper out, so I can try my best. If it's not completely gone, it's okay. After ripping away the paper, we are going to go on to cutting our t-shirt off or away from the pellin. But before we do that, we're going to be looking at the back for a quick second or a moment and just enjoy the beautiful stitch work that we did here. Look how beautiful it is. That's amazing work. And to me, I always find that the most fascinating about our bead work is looking at the back, looking at the stitching that we did, the time we have taken to stitch down our beads. It's just beautiful. Time for the cutscene. This is where we will begin to cut. And you can choose anywhere, any starting point to cut, whatever you're comfortable with. I do like using the beads as a guide to cut, as it does help not cutting it close to your threads at the back there. But if you are a little bit nervous that you're going to be cutting your thread, or you might be, you can also cut a little bit of ways away from the back or from your beads, and then you can trim it later on by looking at the back, seeing how close you are to your beads, and so forth. Once you are done cutting out your pin, we can then move on to the next. We are on to the next step, which is adding the pink leather as our backing to the pin. So I was always taught that we should save any extra material left over, and we shouldn't waste any extra material that we could possibly have for later to do for smaller projects and so on. And I always had the tendency to not do that. But in this video, I'm going to show you that you can do that by putting the t-shirt in the left bottom corner, tracing it out, and cutting out the tracing that I do afterwards. And as you can see, you still have like an L shape left over, and you can use that for mini projects. Once you've drawn your outline, we can now cut it out. Pin time! We are now going to add our pin to the leather backing. And I will show you how I do it. If you do it differently, you can do your way or my way or the way I was taught. So you're going to grab a pencil or a pen, but preferably a pencil. And wherever you're going to place your pin, you're going to mark on each side where that pin is going to be going, because that's where we are going to make a cut and where the pin will go through, and you will see. So now, after making the markings, I'm going to be drawing a line vertically, connecting both sides, and this is where I'll be making my cut. We will fold the t-shirt so that we can make a duo cut as shown here, and you're going to do this to both sides. It is now time to add your pin once you've cut the spots where you needed to cut. We're going to poke the needle through, or the pin through. Be careful not to poke yourself, as it does hurt, like when the needle pokes you when you're sewing. So just do it carefully and slowly. We're going to push that right through onto the other side, and we're also going to do the same on the opposite end, and make sure all of it is pushed through like so, and bam, we have the pin set in place. We are now at the final part, the edge beading. First, we will get a long string of thread, make 3 knots at the end, and thread the needle. For our edge beading, I will be doing something different than what I usually do, as I find this a little easier to do. We will be doing a whip stitch as our edge beading. It's pretty simple once you get the hang of it, but if you know how to do it differently or do a different style of edge beading, you can do that. It's up to you, it's your pen. I want you to do it the way you'd like it. You don't have to follow what I do. But here we go for the whip stitching. So I'm going to be starting at the middle on the bottom, going through the pellin, poking my needle from the back as you can see here. I'm not going to be poking through the leather just yet. This is just so I can hide our tail inside. You can either cut this part off, like cut the tail off, or you can push it in through. I just push my tails in through. But you can always cut it too. I don't know why I didn't cut it. But hey, we learn as we go through, right? Everything is a learning process. So now I'm going to be starting with 3 white beads. And that's the pattern I'm going to be doing, is 3 beads each time. So the whip stitch is literally going up from the back and then going around the edge, as you can see, poking my needle through the leather and through the pellin, going about a bead apart and pushing it through, pulling that needle, making sure the string is tight. So as you can see, and I also did it slowly so it doesn't get knotted up easily. Pull it tight, adjust my beads to the way I want it to look, and then move on to the second part, which is adding the pink beads. Now you can do pink, white, whichever colors you have. I think we only gave pink and white, but if you have other type of beads, you can do a different color if you'd like. But I'm going to be doing the pattern of pink, or white and pink, all the way through. And if you miss any steps, you can always go back in the video, rewatch it. Alright, as we head into the very last step, which is adding your final edge beading stitch. So pink is my last color. I'm going to be going from the back to the front, adding those beads, pulling tight, making sure it's in place. Pull tighter just to make sure, adjust the beads possibly, and everything looks good. Now, we are going to be poking our needle back through from the front to the back to secure it, and we're going to be doing this actually a couple of times. So when you get to the back, you're going to put your needle from the back to the front again, pull it through, and repeat it a few times until you think it's secure. And then we will be adding a knot at the end and cutting our tail off like we usually do, and your pin will now be complete after these steps. I would suggest doing 3 knots instead of 2, just for extra security. And then we're going to go ahead and cut the tail off, cutting as close as we can to the knot, but not too far. And there we go. We are done. And now just take a moment to look at your beautiful beadwork that you've done. And now you can wear it and showcase your beautiful pink shirt pin. Miigwech for watching this video. I'm happy I was able to teach you all how to bead the way I was taught. I can't wait to see everybody's beautiful pink shirt pins that they made for Pink Shirt Day.